Recorded Books and RB Digital present Insidious Intent by Val McDermid, narrated by Saul Reiklin.
A black scene of calumny will be laid open, but you, Doctor, will make all things square again. Second paper on Murder Considered as One of the Fine Arts, Thomas de Quincey. Part 1. Chapter 1. If Catherine McCormick had known she had less than 3 weeks to live, she might have made more of an effort to enjoy Suzanne's wedding. But instead she had adopted her usual attitude of resigned disappointment, trying not to look too disconsolate as she stared at the other guests, dancing as if nobody was watching. It was just like every day at work. Catherine was always the outsider there, too. Even though the title of office manager wielded very little in the way of actual authority, it was enough to set her apart from everyone else. Catherine always felt that when she walked into the kitchenette to make herself a coffee, whatever conversation had been going on either stopped altogether or swerved away from the confidential to the inconsequential. Really, it had been stupid to think today would have been any different. She'd once seen a quote that had stuck with her. The definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. By that standard, she was definitely insane. Sitting on the fringes of a wedding reception on a Saturday night, but expecting to be at the center of conversation and laughter, fell smack bang in the center of repetitive behavior that never produced anything but entirely predictable failure. Catherine sneaked a look at her watch. The dancing had only been going for half an hour, but felt like a lot longer. Nicky from accounts, hips gyrating like a pole dancer, opposite Ginger Jerry, slack-jawed with delight. Anya, Lynn, Mags, and Triona in a neat shamrock formation, elbows tucked in, bodies twitching and heads bobbing to the beat. Emily and Ollie, feet shuffling in sync, eyes locked, grinning at each other like idiots. Idiots who would probably be going home together at the end of the night. She could barely remember the last time she'd had sex. She'd split up with Niall over 3 years ago, but it still stung like a razor cut. He'd walked into the house one evening, the sharp, sour smell of lager on his breath, a faint sheen of sweat on his skin. "I've been headhunted for a job in Cardiff, running my own design team," he'd said, his excitement impossible to miss. "That's great, babe." Catherine had slid off the stool at the breakfast bar, throwing her arms around him, trying to stifle the voice in her head, shouting, "Cardiff? What the fuck am I going to do in Cardiff?" "Big salary increase too," Niall said, his body curiously still, not responding to the hug. "Wow! When are we moving then?" He disentangled himself. Catherine's stomach clenched. "That's the thing, Kath." He looked at his feet. "I want to go by myself." The words didn't make any sense. "What do you mean, by yourself? You're just going to come home at weekends? That's mad. I can get a job down there. I've got transferable skills." He took a step back. "No, look, there's no good way of saying this. I'm not happy, and I haven't been for a while, and I think this is the best way for both of us. For me to move away, start again. We can both start again." And that had been that. Well, not quite. There had been tears and shouting, and she'd cut the crotches out of all his Calvin Kleins, but he'd gone anyway. She'd lost her man, and she'd lost her dignity, and she'd lost her home, because half the lovely terraced house in her favourite Bradfield suburb had been Niall's, and he'd insisted they sell it. So now she lived in a boxy little flat in a 1960s block, too close to where they'd lived together. It had been a mistake to move somewhere so near the place she'd been happy, the house she had to walk past to get to the tram stop every morning. She'd tried making a 10-minute detour to avoid it, but
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.